Yo, what is good, guys? Ryan Hodge with FantasyLabs.com here, and welcome to week 4. I'm going to spend a little bit of time going over my quarterback model. Sorry I missed y'all in week 3, but we're moving on, moving forward, and let's dive right into our week 4 quarterback model. You can see I've got it filtered by rating here. Right out the gate, we have some pretty obvious studs here with Jalen and Josh Allen both rounding out the top of my model here. And I think this makes a ton of sense. You have a well-priced Jalen Hurts. I don't think he's overpriced. I think he's probably priced just about right. He's got a great ceiling projection of 37 points at home versus the Kansas City Chiefs here. He's got 8 pro trends in my model here. You can see from his rushing ability to the projected or to his opponent plus minus, which is just massive at 7. I think it's second on the slate. And he does project to carry some ownership. So that might be one of the downfalls here. But what's nice is if you're playing tournaments, one should never be playing your quarterback without his pass catchers. I don't care who it is, especially when they are this expensive. People will argue, well, Lamar is going to get it done with his legs. What if he rushes for 2? If he rushes for 2 and puts up 180 to 220 passing yards and doesn't throw for any or only throws for 1, he's probably not paying off his salary. You need a lot more. And I think it's similar with Jalen here. Now maybe a little bit less just due to how much cheaper he is rather than like an 8K guy like Josh Allen, or if we take a look at the Patrick Mahomes here and Kyler, who are 7,800. I mean, all of these guys have to get there through the air too in order to be in tournament winning lineups. So please don't play your quarterbacks without their pass catchers. Maybe if there's a guy who is 5,500 or something along those lines, or like a $5,200, it's just like way too cheap. Like Justin Fields, maybe, but I still think you should be looking at Cole Kmet or Allen Robinson. You really need ceilings, and they have to get there by throwing a couple through the air too. So uh, don't play your quarterback without your pass catcher. I don't. Somebody's telling you to do that. I ask for some receipts, man. I just don't think that that's too sharp in any way, shape, or form. You won't find uh, any high volume, high stakes players doing that. It's just not sharp. So with Jalen, what's really nice is you have some really cheap stacking options like Jalen Reagor. You can use Devonta Smith, who I still think is his price is definitely palatable. He's got a large market share of his team's air yards, and obviously super easy to bring back with a guy like Kelsey Hill, McCall Hardman. I mean, any one of those Chiefs guys. So Jalen makes a ton of sense here in regards to his ownership and his player rating. Now, Josh Allen, what's interesting is I don't actually have him projected for 12.6 ownership. It looks like FantasyLabs does. I have him projected for a little less than that. I think I have him projected to be the 3rd highest owned quarterback. But for tournaments, all of his pass catchers, Emmanuel Sanders, Dawson Knox, Stephon Diggs, they all project to be sub 5% owned. So even though Allen's going to catch a little bit of ownership, maybe in some cash games, which I'm not even quite sure. Like I said, I have his ownership just a little bit lower here. I think Allen's in an amazing spot. I mean, they are passing so much. Their passing rate on first and second down is through the roof. They're leading the league. So really good spot there for Josh Allen against Kansas City, or excuse me, against Houston, at home against Houston too. And you can just see like they're playing at an insanely high volume, a massive implied team total here. You could suggest that maybe they start running a little bit more, but I mean, based on what they've shown, they've just continued to throw the ball over and over and over and over again. Now, Justin Fields rounding out the model here at 5,200 is in the top 3. For me, this is a salary play, plus his ceiling. That's why he's starting to rate so well in this model here. He really does have a massive ceiling with how many rushing attempts we can bake into a ceiling projection for him. But this is something, and it's against Detroit, which is a fairly plus matchup here. Opponent plus minus of 1.4. This is not something you could do this in cash. I probably won't be playing Justin Fields in any tournaments, and you can see that in my write up and concise conviction over on the site, as well as he's just not in my quarterback pool at all. Let's actually filter here by ceiling and take a look what we get. And then we'll go check out a different model too. We'll take a look at like the low variance, or even like a different tournament model. So yeah, Jalen as a top 3 ceiling play here as well, and not far off from Mahomes or Josh Allen, and that's why he's going to catch so much ownership at that salary too. There's Lamar, like I was saying, 36.8 ceiling there. Looks like Sean's got the same exact ceiling projection for Kyler as well. And we can take a quick peek at my stuff, which anyone who signs up through my link will have access to this, or you can go to the marketplace and buy my ownership projections. Don't pay attention to these. These are stale, need an update. So please don't build off of this if you're watching this Sunday morning. I have these ownership projections much different. So, yep, I've got Jalen a little bit lower, with Lamar and some of these other guys higher from a ceiling projection. Kyler Murray, I think this makes sense from a good ceiling projection standpoint. Once again, even though he's rushing, please make sure you're stacking him. I don't care if it's Christian Kirk or Rondale Moore or obviously, Hopkins, but just make sure you're stacking these guys who are rushing too. Somebody's telling you to do it. Otherwise, like I said, ask for some receipts. Take a look back at the rating here. One quarterback that was definitely surprising to me, seeing this low in rating, was Dak Prescott, all the way down there at 32.48 as far as a rating goes. I think this is mainly because of how unfriendly Carolina has looked against opposing quarterbacks. They do have a very tough opponent plus minus here of negative 4.8. And my model is going to take into that a lot. Quarterback opponent rating is definitely something that it does look at. So like let's go take a look at more of like a low variance model here with a cash game model. And we'll take a look at some of these ratings and we'll see if it's similar. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes up a little bit, but yeah, so he definitely comes up a lot in like a lower variance model where we really are focusing on like a median projections, as well as factoring in salary and some other things like projected plus minus points per salary. You can see it's pretty good here at 3.4. So that's why Dak is so low in a model like mine is just I have different sliders selected. You can see like bargain rating, projected plus minus, projected floor. These are really big indicators and trends for lower variance models if you're looking for a little bit more of a floor on some of your cash game stuff and not focus too much on that ceiling, where I think you should still focus on ceiling in cash game, especially in your head-to-heads and three-mans. You definitely want to bake in some ceiling there. So in a low variance model, we still have Allen and Hurts rounding it out, and Taylor Heineke up here as well. He was pretty high in my model. Russ starting to creep into the top here. What was really interesting about Russ, great leverage score there from a projected ownership standpoint at 7. That might be the best. Oh no, there's a couple guys at 9 and 13. Kyler Murray, good leverage score, obviously. So a leverage score is just their projected ownership and their ceiling taken into account. So it basically ranks what their ownership is going to look like versus how many points they could score from a ceiling standpoint for tournaments, and gives you a leverage score. Something that I love to use for wide receivers a lot. So rounding out this cash model, you've got Matt Ryan and Russell Wilson. Matt Ryan definitely not on my radar at all this week. So it's interesting that he comes up here. I guess salary here, once again, you're going to take a look at projected plus minus, projected floor, and their bargain rating. So projected plus minus 0.83 kind of gets them up there. and then maybe that median and salary is really what starts to round him out here at the top of this model. Definitely not a guy on my radar. Not because of a matchup, just more inept offense. I don't mind grabbing, one or two pass catchers from this team every once in a while when it makes sense from a salary standpoint. Obviously, using a guy like Kyle Pitts and maybe some mini correlation with Terry McLaurin could look well, or could bode well in tournaments for you this week. But Matt Ryan's not really on my radar. Kyler is definitely a guy who I find myself wanting a little bit more and more of as the week goes on at $7,800. I just look at this fantastic leverage score, low ownership. I mean, these are the guys who we want week in and week out. They just continue to carry low ownership, but are winning tournaments left and right, or at least giving you, top 1% lineups left and right. You just kind of got to piece the rest together, which can sometimes be difficult due to their salary. But Kyler is definitely a guy who I think I'll up my exposure to as we get closer to Sunday. My favorite low owned stack is absolutely Josh Allen and the Bills, but I think Kyler Murray and Jalen will start to round out the rest of my quarterback ownership uh, as Sunday morning comes. So going down this model a little bit more, Jared Goff at Chicago, hard pass for me here. Tough matchup. I mean, actually, the matchup isn't tough. Let me rephrase that. I just I just think it's a in general, Jared Goff is going to be put into slower pace games, and it's just a tough spot as a fantasy player to use a guy like Jared Goff, especially when it's going to be against a team like Chicago or Washington or something along those lines. Uh, we already touched on Dak Prescott and Justin Fields here a little bit. Ryan Tannehill is I mean, look, watch, he'll probably win somebody something with Chester Rogers and Marcus Johnson, rounding out his pass catchers with Julio and AJ Brown, both gimpy. But I do think that is a 30 plus touch game for Derrick Henry, so I'm not sure how he really gets there and Derrick Henry really gets there because Tannehill absolutely has to find like 45 yards on the ground and rush one in plus throw for three. In order to really get into some winning tournament lineups in very large field stuff. In smaller field stuff, he does not have to go that nuclear by any means. And then from there, Lamar Jackson down here at Denver, coming in this low on the rating is probably the opponent plus minus here of a negative 6.9. Super tough matchup. They just have not been giving it up to quarterbacks recently. Take a look at what Denver's wide receiver opponent plus minus is. Um, Yeah, minus 2.2 as well. So really just not friendly in any way, shape, or form to the passing game there. So that would be one of the reasons why Lamar rates so low. Granted, he can get a lot done with his legs. I think it's just extremely difficult for him to pay off that salary at $7,500 if he's also not getting it done through the air as well. You can still see pretty big ceiling projection here at 36.8. I think I have him a little bit lower than that, and if I don't, I probably should. I just think it's a very tough matchup, and so we obviously need to be taking into consideration the range of outcomes and how likely they are to hit their ceiling. It's not just that they have this, 40-point ceiling because Patrick Mahomes or insert quarterback here has done it once. It's how likely are they to hit that in this specific matchup too is definitely something that we have to take into consideration. So I think Dak is probably the one that has that stood out to me the most being so low um, in my own model. Patrick Mahomes is still up here at $8,100 at Philly. I'm not gonna say anything about you guys know. You can just lock in Mahomes week in and week out, and he has the potential. Tough matchup, minus 3.8 on the opponent, plus minus only 4 pro trends here for Patrick Mahomes, and a good leverage score there based off of his ceiling and his projected ownership for week 4. So, like I said, these two guys make a ton of sense. You'll also see they're catching the most ownership. I don't think it's that big of a deal in tournaments because their pass catchers all project to be pretty low owned. So it's really not that big of a deal to eat a little bit of that flat ownership at quarterback when their pass catchers also don't. It's not like Diggs is projecting to be 27% owned or something ridiculous, right? So like here, let's just take a look at Diggs's ownership. Look at that, 14.2%, not bad. And then if we go take a look back at Sanders, 7.7%. I have them lower than this. Maybe I need to readjust some of my ownership projections. I have them all a little bit lower than that. And then I think what's great is bringing it back with a guy like Brandon Cooks, who projects for 6.3% ownership according to FantasyLabs projections. I think I have him at like 4.9, just under 5%. So using those guys, I think, is pretty sharp this week, passing the ball a ton. So I think it makes sense that they're up there in ratings. Jalen Hurts, and then Russell Wilson, another guy rounding it out in San Francisco. Could be tough with guys like George Kittle, with it dealing with a calf injury looks like could be definitely much closer to a game time decision come Sunday. So that could slow the pace of this game down. And Seattle's just been running a little slower than we would like them to, and by a little I mean a lot slower than we would like them to. So Russ is definitely tough. And at $7,100, I think I would just prefer to play a guy like Jalen Hurts. So hopefully that's a little bit of insight into quarterback model here on fantasylabs.com, and run good in week 4, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.